My name is Chef Jacqueline Orak, and I'm the Department Chair of the Culinary and Hospitality Division here at the Culinary Institute of the South at Technical College of the Lowcountry here in beautiful Bluffton, South Carolina. I'm very excited that I will be bringing to you today a mini-series on cake construction. This series is made possible through the sponsorship of the South Carolina Restaurant and Lodging Association, as well as Ecolab. We appreciate all of their support in providing us to give you these videos. I will be teaching you from the beginning steps of mise en place, how to properly mise for a cake, and then we'll move into how to properly slice a cake, moving into how to crumb coat and fill a cake, going to then the final icing, and ultimately how to do simple classic decorations. So thank you so much for watching the series, and hang on and stay tuned. Hi, Chef Jacqueline Orak here again, and we're going to talk about the first step, the most important step for cake construction is going to be mise en place. And for those of you who do not know what the French culinary phrase mise en place means, that means everything in its place. And with everything in its place, it allows for you to get your job and execute it in the perfect time management and have all your tools, ready to go. So when I like to start off with my cake construction, we will have here our turntable. We're gonna have a little safety, sticky, I'm not really sure what you call this thing, that will hold my cake very carefully. We have our tool here, which is a slicer. It's a serrated knife that's going to be slicing our cake into the layers, all right? Of course, I do have my chocolate cake that we will be slicing here, all right? And we're going to center that right on the cake. I do have cake boards in the size of a 10-inch cake that we are cutting, so when I cut my layers, I'm able to put them right on top of the cake board for ease of transport. And also there's one other thing that I like to bring about when we're talking about working. I like to work smarter and not harder. We also have to think about our bodies when we are working in this field. I'm very tall, so when I would be cutting this cake, I would have to bend and lean over to get this done, and that will in time hurt your back, especially if you're doing hundreds of cakes in a big production. Even one cake, your back, your neck could get sore. So if you are tall or even if you are short, you want to work to your best ability. So I am actually going to grab here a Cambro that you can see I flipped upside down. I have a towel that I'm going to put for safety, and I'm going to lift my cake to go on top of this so that when I'm going to be cutting this, I'm working to my height and to my capability, okay? So this is where we're gonna start with, and you wanna make sure that your cake turntable, before we start, I do wanna show you. So it spins round and around, all right? If we had a little bit of problem, all right, it is a two-piece. So when we grab, we wanna make sure we grab from the bottom and not from just the sides, because obviously we will drop the base. All right, we could spray a little bit of Pam or put a little bit of oil. That'll help lubricate the prong, and we go in and it'll allow it to spin better. So that's if you have any spinning issues. But anyway, so I'm gonna put my little safety down here. I'm gonna take my cake, I'm gonna put it on, and again, as you turn this turntable, I like to make sure that it's completely centered, because otherwise it's going to throw the cake off center if it is not perfectly centered on your turntable, all right? So, but a lot of people think using your slicer that you're actually going to be slicing the cake, but honestly, how I do it, that is not the fact. I actually hold my knife very level and very still, all right? And it's actually the motion of turning the cake on the turntable that is actually doing the slicing. You will not really see me going up and back to create the slice, okay? And you can see here, again, this is a 10-inch width cake, and I'm gonna get 3 layers out of here. So I like to look and see it. It's got a nice level top. I'm not gonna worry about any kind of dome I could have removed, but I'm gonna perfectly cut this into 3 layers. So you want to mark your 3 layers, all right? So I'm gonna go and mark layer 1, and I'm gonna split this layer here, into 2. So I'm just marking so I know these are my guider, going to be my guider lines when I am going to go around and cut each layer. So we start from the top layer, and we're going to be working this first layer, and then we're going to cut the second layer. So really, it's going to be 3 layers, excuse me, but we're only going to make 2 slices, all right? So again, I'm going to bend my knees. I'm going to get my eye level here to the cake. I'm going to hold, I am right-handed, so I'm holding my serrated knife in my right hand. I'm going to get down to so I can see where my first initial mark was. I'm going to stick my knife right here, all right? And my goal is I'm going to make a line, my guider line. So I'm going to turn this completely. So with my left hand, I'm going to be going counterclockwise, okay? Holding my knife nice and level and still. And then once I go around one time, then I'm going to start to put a little bit of pressure, pushing the cake through the knife, and it's going to cut. So I'm first cut around is just the marking of it. So I have my guider line, all right? And my eyes, just so that you understand, are looking right here so I can see the blade of my slicer and I can see the line that's gonna make. So here we go. I'm not making any movements, but the knife, I am going around making my initial guideline. Boom. If you can see, I landed right back where I started. So I know I have made my guideline. So all I'm gonna do now is hold my knife very still, and I'm gonna continue to turn the table, and it is gonna do all the slicing for me. 1, 2, 3. All right, so that's your first slice. I'm going to, whoop, cake's a little crumbly, that's okay. I'm going to, with that, is a nice and light, airy cake. I'm gonna flip it over upside down. Again, I like to work smart, not hard. And you don't, if you have a little breakage, you don't throw it away, because let me tell you, icing can save anything and everything. So it is always good to have a little bit of an issue so that you learn how to properly correct it. So this is layer 1, which will probably be my middle layer, all right? I'm gonna go put the cake back on top here. All right, so again, we're gonna find right here, you can see my initial cut marking, right? Again, I'm going to put my knife in that slot, and then I'm going to carefully make my initial guideline, all right? Holding my arm, my right arm, the knife slicer very still, all right? And boom, I've landed right in the center of the initial line. So now I have my guideline made for me. So now again, I'm gonna hold my slicer very still and use the weight of the cake going into the knife to push it through. So honestly, when you think about it, you're only cutting halfway through on one side. As you continue to turn, then it's gonna cut the other half, and it's gonna meet in center, and then you're done. So you don't ever see me actual slicing, okay? So I'm gonna go back in. I'm gonna get down so I can watch, keep my arm and my knife level. We're gonna go all the way through. 1, 2, 3, and it should be right through. All right, there we go. I'm gonna have my cake board ready to go. I'm gonna be able to pick up my cake, and this was freshly baked today, so I'm going to carefully slide it, all right? And there we go, all right? You have layer 1. This is actually gonna be the one that had a little bit of breakage. This will be my middle layer, all right, when I put my crumb coat, and this is gonna be layer 3. And as you can see, they are pretty about even, about a ½ inch a piece. So hang on, and we're gonna clean this up, because with our cake construction, all these crumbs that you see here, we're going to do a crumb coat next. But we always clean up after each stage to keep it nice and clean. Stay tuned. All right, we're back. So we are gonna start now what I like to do when I have the time, which honestly I do it for pretty much every single cake that I ice and decorate, is we're gonna do what's called a crumb coat, all right? And the purpose of a crumb coat is to lock and seal all the crumbs. As you can see, Again, this is a freshly made cake that was done today, and it has crumbs that are very loose and can come off pretty much everywhere. So with a crumb coat, it is a, we will be filling it as we want it to be for our final product, but we're going to be putting a very thin layer on the outside and the top that really is just going to set our cake shape, so that when we put our final coat of icing on there, that we're free from crumbs and it can be as beautiful as you can make it. So again, this cake was freshly baked this morning, and it is very light and airy and moist. And if you have a cake that's a little bit more dry, I would apply a first layer of simple syrup. I'm not doing that on here because this is quite moist and a rich cake. Again, this is a chocolate cake. So before we start our construction of our crumb coat, let's talk about the mise en place that we're going to need for this. Of course, our turntable, elevated for me specifically, and then let's talk about our tools. So I have here 3 different spatulas. All right, so let's start with this one. All right, this is called a baby offset. As you can see, it is smaller than our large offset, and it is set offset that at an angle, which will allow you to carefully ice and move the icing back and forth very easily. Okay, so I like to use this when I'm applying my layers. If you do not like the small offset, you can use a larger offset, and all offsets, as well as straight icing spatulas too, come in all different shapes and sizes. So I always suggest that you try out and test out different tools, and then you use what tools work best for you. And also, all these different tools, as you will see, have different handles, they have different weights, and each one feels differently in your hand. So I do encourage, again, to try out all different ones for how it feels the most comfortable in your hands. All right, and last but not least, I have our straight icing spatula, and this is going to be the spatula that I use to smooth out the sides of the cake. All right, so I've got my 3 spatulas ready to go. And then last but not least, I do have some beautiful Italian meringue buttercream here, and this is not all of my icing, so I have split my icing into 2 batches. So this is what we're going to be using for, again, to use as a filling for the layer, and then this is what we're going to be using for the crumb coat. So if I get any crumbs in here, I will use this to crumb and ice another cake for the crumb coat, and I have my beautiful crumb-free icing to do my final 1/4 inch icing and decorating, again, crumb-free. So I'm going to take my spatula, and I'm going to put a good amount on the center here, because again, remember, this is going to be the filling of your cake. All right, so I am using, again, my baby offset spatula. I have my cake centered on my cake stand, all right, elevated to my height, and then all I'm going to do is take my spatula and move the buttercream and work from the center out. And I'm going to be doing this motion, all right, going left and right with my right hand, because I'm right-handed. And then I will be, as you will see, doing a double motion. So sometimes you have to have both hands working at the same time. And unfortunately, I don't even think about it anymore. I've done this for so many years that I just go to town. But it is going to be working this pile, again, from the center out, all right, and trying to keep it nice and even. And I want this icing to go all the way to the edge. And I even want to see a little bit of overhang, which will help me finalize my crumb coat. So let's get started, all right? So you're going to see I'm working center out, a back and forward motion, all right? Back and forth, and I am turning my table back and forth, back and forth. It's hard for me to talk and do this at the same time, but I'm working it and trying to keep it as level also as possible. And if I see that I need to add more icing to it, I certainly can, and just apply it where I need it versus starting again from the center and working my way out. So as I can see, I might need to add just a little bit more, but I'm trying to very carefully keep it level and getting it all the way to the edge, all right? I'm going to, again, you control where the icing goes, all right, with that offset. All right, so I might actually be okay. And also you want to think about when you're biting into a cake, you want about a 1/2 inch of cake, about a 1/4 inch of icing or filling, all right, because you don't want to jip your customer, but also this icing is what's going to keep your cake fresh and moist, and when we put the icing on the outside, that is what is going to lock and seal it, so it doesn't go bad, doesn't go stale. It retains the freshness of it. All right, so now I'm just looking here, I'm getting eye level with the cake, all right, and making sure it looks pretty good to me. So what I want you to look at and focus on here is that you can see there's about a 1/4 inch of icing, and then you have your cake there. All right, so next step is going to be I cleaned off my offset on my Crumb Coat bowl, okay, putting my offset tool down. I'm taking my next cake layer, and if you recall, I did have a boo-boo, and I'm actually going to take these pieces off because I will place them on there afterwards. But as you can see, what the purpose of a crumb coat is because the crumbs are free to move as they go, and we just, again, want to lock and seal them all in. So when I'm landing this cake layer on top of this cake, I'm going to push this to the edge. As you can see, there's a little bit of overhang here. And I'm going to line up this edge with this edge, okay? I'm going to kind of hold the cake board at an angle so that I don't dip into the frosting that I just put on there. So I'm going to hold on to it. I'm going to carefully place it down and land it and pull the cake board out at the same time. All right, boom, there you go. All right, another little piece came off, but that's okay. So I'm going to sit here. You can see I have a little bit of the missing cake. So I'm actually just going to take some of my frosting, put a little bit on here to act as, guess what? That's right, guys, to act as glue. All right, we're going to glue it just so that when we are putting our outside crumb coat on, it will stick. All right, so again, one thing you're going to learn that icing is the fix-all for everything. Never think that you're going to throw the cake out. You can always fix a cake. There we go. Okay. All right, so I've got a towel here. I'm going to clean my hands, but I'm going to look here to make sure that I'm nice and centered here with the cake, and I can move it around if I need to. Looks good to me. All right, I'm going to take my towel back, and now I'm going to apply my second amount of filling. Again, I'm going to put a good amount right here on the center. Okay. Taking my baby offset, and again, it'd be the same motion, back and forth with my right hand, using my left hand for the turntable. All right, and my goal is to work evenly from the center out, and keeping it as well nice and level. We want a flat top, and again, don't forget, you have the tool. You are the one that moves the icing where you want it. And at this part, because this is the more delicate side, I like to work a little bit more carefully and not try to destroy and damage it, because we do have that little bit of the breakage. But again, we will fix that in just a few moments. You can see back and forth, working it evenly from the center out, trying to keep it, again, as level as possible. I'm going to hold this there just because this is where I had my little getting down so I can see, getting to the level of the cake. And I think I need to add just a little bit more. I'm going to add it just on my palette knife. I feel like I want to add a little bit more icing just to keep it, again, at the nice 1/4 inch amount for a filling. So as you can see, I'm trying to get this all the way out to the edge. And also, keeping it level at the same time. All right, so I'm getting down with it. It is flat here. I've brought my icing all the way to the edge. All right, looks good. I'm happy. All right, wipe my palette knife off. And then I go to my last cake layer again. I'm going to line up the seams, okay? And I'm going to carefully slide the board off. Boom. Okay. And since I had a little bit of, I'm gonna move it just to make sure it's nice and content. Yep, looks good, looks good. All right, so what I'm gonna do now is I have a little bit of icing left. I hope I might have to get a little bit more, we'll see. I'm gonna put a very thin layer on the top just to act as glue, because with a cake, for a final icing, I like to have a flat top and sharp 90-degree angles, all right? And we'll learn how to get that sharp edge is what we call, or I call, landing the airplane. We'll learn about that in a second. But I'm gonna go back to my baby offset. I'm gonna spread this very thin, same motion, all right? You will see the cake. Again, the purpose of this crumb coat is to lock. As you can see, when I move my spatula, the crumbs are lifting up. So again, the purpose of this is to lock and seal all the crumbs into the cake. And for every time you do a top layer, so this is the top of my cake, I want to bring the icing and have overhang. I want this icing to extend over the edge, because then when I connect the icing on the sides to the top, I want to create what's called a fortress, and I want to bring my icing up, which you'll see in just a few moments. But I can't create that fortress if I don't get this icing to extend all the way to the edge and create, again, an overhang. So again, you say, oh my God, I see all those specks, I can see the cake. Have no fear, we are just doing the crumb coat, all right? And that's okay. But I do want to try to make sure that it is nice and level, all right? Always trying to work to your best ability. And you can see I do have some crumbs potentially in this. Again, this icing is called my crumb icing as well. So I can put this in the bowl and I will reuse that on the sides, but it is not going to be going into my final icing. All right, so as you can see here, I have the icing extending all the way to the edge everywhere. So now I'm going to start and apply icing on my sides. For that, I'm going to take my straight icing spatula. Before I apply anything, I'm going to go around, okay? And how I do this is I hold my right hand at a kind of a 90-degree. It is not a super comfortable position, but this is the classic way of icing a cake with a classic tool. And also, if you see, there are crumbs all over here, just so that you understand why a crumb coat is very important when doing cakes, especially wedding cakes. So I'm going to apply my icing spatula directly against the cake, and I'm going to go around and let this kind of go into itself, putting a little bit of pressure just to see exactly where the icing is and where I need to add more icing. Again, remember, all we're doing here is locking and sealing in all the crumbs. So we're not going to be applying a lot of icing here. It's again just a very thin film. You're going to see the cake through. So I'm going to clean up my icing bowl and get it all together. All right, again, doesn't look like much, but then I don't need that much. And when you use your spatula, you typically use the a quarter to a 1 inch of it is where you're going to, or at least where I put the icing. And then again, you work in small motions, small amounts. So you're never gonna see me take more than about a heaping tablespoon, right? And the icing is, as you can see, nice and firm and stiff. It's not going anywhere, so you can kind of move it around. And you're gonna apply it. And again, moving back and forth. Again, it's gonna be just a very thin amount. Wherever you see kind of gaps and holes is where I'm going to be applying it. So I create a nice base to ice this cake. All right, back and forth. All right, clean that icing up on the turntable. All right, gonna apply some here. Back and forth. I'm gonna go with a little bald spotted right there. All right. Oh, I'm gonna see there's a little hole right there. I'm gonna fill that in. Okay. And now I'm gonna go around, and you'll see, if you can see, my straight icing spatula is never really touching the turntable. It is staying at just above the base of the cake. And so now I'm just gonna go around to try to build up my fortress. I'm putting a little bit of pressure to get this icing as nice and tight. Because again, this is building when I wanna put on my final coat. So I did take some off, as you can see here, and that's okay, all right? So as you can see, I was talking about a little fortress. So if you see, I lifted all that excess icing up to create a small little castle, all right? And that's what you wanna see. I could have done a little bit better there or here, but there's enough around here, again, for this particular type of crumb coat to do what's called land my airplane, all right? So I'm gonna be putting my straight icing spatula down, and now I'm gonna be getting my large offset spatula, okay? So landing the airplane is what creates the nice sharp 90-degree edge on a cake, okay? So how this goes is you start in the air, and you come down, and you touch the cake, and you pull towards you, okay? What will create a rounded edge that we don't want is if you go dip down and up, right? That will create a round edge. So we're never dipping down below the cake. We're coming from a nice sharp 45-degree angle, and we're gonna land and pull. Turn, land, and pull, all right? So I'm not gonna talk when I do this because I always have to concentrate, all right? So here we go. I'm gonna land my airplane. And excess, you wipe it off. Going to land your airplane. Going to land. And always want to make sure you have a clean spatula. And if you see that it's still dirty, get the excess off, and you can wipe it on a clean towel. All right, turning, landing. And there you have it. We have a nice crumb coat iced cake, all right? And we're almost done. I'm going to clean up. You can see all these crumbs. I'm gonna clean all this edge up with my offset. I'm just gonna pull. You can see I've cleaned, got the excess icing, the crumbs, put that back in my crumb bowl, all right? And I'm gonna take my large offset. I'm gonna wipe it clean, all right? And then I'm gonna pick it up, all right? Because at this point, once you have your icing on here, this has to go into a refrigerator to set up, okay? And get nice and firm. And with this being Italian meringue buttercream, over half of this icing is butter. So when you put soft butter into a cold refrigerator, it will harden up. And we want that nice hard crumb coat so that when we apply our final icing coat, it goes on nice and smooth, and all of these crumbs, as you can see, are locked in, and we have nothing to worry about. Hang on.